Share with us about that process.
I guess the thing I think that's most interesting to me, the Stargate corridor is like the thing I'm most proud of in the movie, and it was the most troublesome in the movie. And it was initially going to be a slot, a kind of a rectangular slot in one of Jupiter's moons. And through that slot, if you looked, you would see at the other end of the slot was another place or another dimension or another galaxy or something. And we couldn't no one could even begin to make that work. It didn't make any sense. And so we started thinking about other ways to do it, or other ways to do it with more of a, quote, light show kind of thing or something. And I realized that when we were doing To the Moon and Beyond, before 2001, I had not worked directly with John Whitney, but he had been doing some very interesting op art kind of things that were in the end sequence of that movie, which was also depicting kind of another dimension. And the idea was, that John Whitney had been developing, was to set up kind of an animation stand with a camera looking at artwork that was on some kind of motorized device, and leaving the camera shutter open for many seconds while patterns of moire patterns or colors or various kinds of things were just moving around. And so what occurred onto the film was an accumulation of time under controlled circumstances, because these movements were controlled by motors, and they could be repeated on frame after frame after frame, and if you incrementally change the motor's motion, you could create shapes. And I started thinking about that for the Stargate and realized that, if you can imagine a time lapse or a time exposure photograph of a freeway at night or something, and you see all the lights of car headlights or taillights just become beams of light. You don't see the cars because they're streaked out of oblivion, and all you see is these streaks of light. And if you can imagine that all those people driving those cars flash their lights on and off, you'd see these kind of dots and dashes. And I realized that if we could do that under controlled circumstances and doing it dimensionally, from front to back, not this way, maybe we could create shapes. And that it seemed appropriate to me that that was appropriate to the movie because it transcended time. It would be time as a component of each frame of film, not just something that occurred at an instant of time, something that occurred over a period of time. And so time became a component of the Stargate, where I built this big device that had a very thin slit, and behind the slit was this op art backlit artwork that would slide behind the slit, and the camera would move toward the slit. And while the camera is moving toward the slit, it's automatically focusing from 15 feet away to 1 inch, and would create an exposure of a plane passing the camera on one side of the lens and accumulating the pattern that I had made on the artwork behind their plane. And so each frame of film took about 1 minute to make each side. And each of those frames included 1 million different positions of focus as well, because I was automatically focusing from 15 feet to 1 inch, which made the plane look much larger than it would be if it was out of focus or something. And then we had to do it twice and flip the artwork over and do the other side and try to match the center line. And Kubrick really liked that. And so we started shooting a lot of it. And that started leading to a lot of other ideas, which I call generally slit scan. And there are other shots done later that were these more amorphous things where I started reflecting light off big drums of shiny plastic, creating these kind of waves of light, things like that. And it was the beginning of understanding that time is a component of imagery, and we could make imagery that was transcending time and space, and solve the problem of the movie. The Stargate was born, and here's the trip. So we did a lot of that, and then a lot of the other stuff that comes after that, of the liquids in tanks. Those shots are all about that wide. They're little tiny shots looking straight down into a little vat of liquid, and they're dropping paint of various kinds. He had all kinds of formulas, and he had an artist from New York working on him to do some of that stuff. And there was thousands and thousands of feet of that footage, because every time he did it, some weird new thing would happen, or new color would happen, or some kind of dispersion would happen. And so for every shot in the film, there's 199 more that are not in the film. The shooting ratio on this movie was 200 to 1. So I could go on forever about all that stuff, but it gets a little too technical.
Well, you answered part of my question, or my next question, which is,